is it illegal to enunciate? Like, damn. And really, these vocals, it's nothing that makes you want to throw a shoe. Nah. People say that Janae, right, the scientist Summer Walker, says they even give hookah. So I don't know if this is like the music that you hear in the background while girls smoking hookah and like blowing into the camera. Like it when it jiggle. Make it wiggle. Hey guys, it's your girl Cameron and I'm back at it again with another video. And today we are going to be talking about the current state of female R&B. About a month ago, I did a video on the current state of male R&B. Is male R&B on life support? And I felt like this was important to prop that conversation up because we talk about the women quite often. So we got that out of the way. We had a lot of great discourse. A lot of other questionable discourse where, of course, men were blaming women for the reason why male R&B has stifled in the mainstream over the years. But what's new, right? The sky is blue. But I want to talk about what makes me most excited, female R&B. And I think that this is also a discussion in itself. I do think that there's been a unique struggle in female R&B and some nuances and differences here. So I want to really juggle this discourse today. And I encourage you, if you are more so of a pop fan and you're not as knowledgeable on R&B, we are going to go through a full scope of female artists that help not only shape R&B, but help shape pop music, right? And help shape the standards of what we consider great. And a lot of this comes from Selena Johnson's interview that she did not too long ago, discussing how R&B singers don't have to really be able to sing.
The watered downness of the vocal has contributed to now the new R&B in a way. And so when some of us hear it, we like, people like that, they ain't even singing good. Well, I come from an era where you had to know how to sing. Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Aretha Franklin, Shaka Khan, Brandy. I come from an era where you had to know how to sing, where now you really don't. Yeah. So I think we're losing a little bit of the emotion that we've been tied to because of the way that our artists sang back then.
So the question here is it no lies told? Is there nuance here? Is this a case of the past being gone? We've seen women have been some of the prime vocalists in the genre, and for that to be kind of a commentary from a veteran in the game, a vocalist in the game, I think it's important to discuss. R&B in the female space has been particularly stripped down to a vibe. The vibe, guys. I think that is plaguing female R&B the most. Where aesthetics run rampant, the vocal gymnasts are in hiding, where are you at? And where the girls are more committed to an image than maybe their craft? Question mark. We're going to answer these questions today. Let's discuss. Comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already. I believe by the time I post this, crossing my fingers, we'll be at 70,000 subscribers. Thank you guys. From the bottom of my heart, I couldn't have imagined starting this year with 3,000 subscribers, and we're not even through the end of the year yet, and I'm at 70,000. It is actually insane. Also, if my tongue is blue, I had a Jolly Rancher. But thank you. And without further ado, let's just get right into the video. So here we are going to start this video with a journey through R&B, and we will stop along the way. This video, we are going to dive more into the idea of subgenres and some other historical facts that I did not touch on in the male R&B video. So get your snack, kick your feet up, get a blanket, get your notepad out, your pen and paper, because today's a bit of a history lesson. I feel like we have a good premise on what R&B is. R&B stands for rhythm and blues, originating around the 1940s in the United States of America within Black American communities. And the stylistic origins of the genre include blues, jazz, spirituals, gospel, boogie woogie, jump blues, and swinging, all derivative of Black American styles. Of course, some of this Black American style had influence with West African origin due to the transatlantic slave trade, but A lot of this centered in the southern region of the United States of America. But of course, the Great Migration, our ancestors, my ancestors, moved up north and we spread out across the country. And that's how it permeated through America, right? And not only became Black American culture, but this kind of music, our kind of music, became American culture. Black American creation was the driving force of R&B as a genre that allowed us to express ourselves vocally, right, and lyrically through our emotion. And vulnerability was not something that was given to us or attributed to us by the outside world. We were operating in spaces of oppression, brutality, and suppression, right? And a genre like R&B was a voice, an outlet, a way of honesty that we could all share with each other and convene through music. People would sing about their experiences of pain, longing for joy and freedom, as well as our experience in facing racism, relationships, economics, and individual and communal expression, rooted in storytelling and raw emotion. So let's go through R&B through the years, decades by decades. This is the fun part. So the genre's birthplace was within the 40s and 50s. And we can call this the birthing and awakening of R&B as a singular genre. So Billboard's first list of songs that were popular amongst Black Americans was called the Harlem Hit Parade. And it adorned some female artists like, let's say, Billie Holiday, who went as Lady Day at the time. Her song Travelin' Light was on the chart, was on the first iteration of the chart. Men dominated more in popularity. Mind you, a lot of Black women were facing misogyny, right? So there was also an extra layer of navigating, getting in that spotlight. So there wasn't as many, but we start working our way in there. So the Harlem Hit Parade was representative of the most popular records in Harlem, Harlem being in New York. And the list was based upon a survey of record stores within the Harlem district, the Black capital of America at the time, and the lineage of the R&B chart can be linked to here. Now, mind you, the Harlem Hit Parade wasn't just R&B. Right? It was jazz, it was blues, it was pop. It was Black music being relegated to its own specific chart. So let's get that clear. And I'm going to say this a lot. We are going to see that a lot of Black artists were relegated to the R&B space. And all of them were not fully R&B or were barely R&B to begin with. But I digress. They would sometimes call it race records to differentiate Black music from white America's music. But there was still this defining, right? This development of this R&B sound that we slowly get to. And that R&B sound was very influenced by that gospel and the soulfulness in the voice, the riffs, the runs that we'll see starting to really shape what R&B looks like from an artistic perspective. Now we see women like Ruth Brown, who became notated as the queen of R&B, really rising to the cream of the crop at that first crop of R&B artists. She actually placed hits in the top 5 every year from 1951 to 1954. And I encourage you go look up a video. She has such a bolstering voice, such a presence, skilled, controlled, but so much personality filled in one voice. And actually a song called Hey Mama, He Treats Your Daughter Mean was really fun, so definitely check that one out. But you can also not only see the direct influence she had on R&B, but an influence she had on rock and roll. Clock that T. And then I also think of people like Shirley and Lee, Shirley being the female counterpart of that group, and Della Reese, You're Nobody Until Someone Loves You. So there's some great artists that you guys can look at within that 40s, 50s period. Now we make it to the 1960s, and this is such a special time for me to research and talk about because my family is from Detroit, Michigan. I'm from Michigan. My grandparents were raised here, and my family has ties to some Motown artists. And around this time, R&B was now referred to as soul music. So you'll see like they keep changing the name. And Motown was a catalyst for propelling the genre and producing many female stars that would go on to help shape the sound of R&B music and pop music. So we have Diana Ross, The Supremes, Brenda Holloway. She's a sleeper. Check her out. Really great, beautiful voice. Tammy Terrell, Gladys Knight. And then we have some other artists who were not affiliated with Motown, but Aretha Franklin, Detroit native, whoop whoop. Always got to shout out Detroit. We got Patti LaBelle, Etta James with At Last, Carla Thomas, who was known as the Queen of Memphis Soul, Dionne Warwick. One of my favorite songs, Walk On By, such a beautiful song, was actually sampled by Doja Cat with her song Paint the Town Red, if you didn't peep that. Dionne Warwick and Whitney Houston are actually cousins, but Dionne Warwick was one of those first Black women who was really paving the way in music and breaking a lot of boundaries. So you gotta give her that credit. And then also Nancy Wilson, who had this level of multi-genre appeal. She was really more so of a jazz artist, but she brought that pop and R&B flair to the mix. And then we get to the 70s and 80s. Let's just say within the late 60s and 70s, early 70s, we see a bit of a movement. It's called the progressive soul movement. And I want you guys to think of that sonic sound as like what Stevie Wonder was making or Marvin Gaye. That was another subgenre that was starting to evolve. And then by the 1980s, a newer style of R&B emerged known as contemporary R&B at the time. And they merged styles of pop, soul, funk, disco, hip hop, and electronic music. Off the Wall was really a precursor for ushering in this sound, this mix. And we're going to go into listing some women who really defined the 70s and 80s. But let's be very clear. There were some black artists, many of whom were women, who were making other genres of music, but because they were black, they were relegated to R&B. Okay, first name on the list I'm going to say is Donna Summer, the queen of disco music. I would even argue popular music. Music to me would not be the same without a Donna Summer. But I mention her in the R&B category because she was often awarded and rewarded within R&B categories. So her first Grammy was in 1979 for Best R&B Vocal Performance with Last Dance. We got Shaka Khan. We have Stephanie Mills. Stephanie Mills actually starred in the Broadway play The Wiz. At 17 years old, she is a vocal prodigy, very rooted in Broadway, so she really has a way of using her vocal technique. Stunning singer. If you have not heard Stephanie Mills, go look her up. Get into it. We have Cheryl Lynn. We have Minnie Riperton. We have Tina Marie. Squarebiz. Come on. Stacey Lattisaw. Stacey Lattisaw was actually a teeny bopper. She was about 12 when she recorded her first album in 1979. So we did have some young voices in R&B. Whitney Houston, of course, the best, the greatest to ever do it. Anita Baker. And Sade. And I want to make a note about Anita and Sade because I think that they added a different edge to R&B around this time. So it was said particularly that Sade helped usher into the mainstream this quiet storm genre, literally called Quiet Storm, which is a radio format and genre of R&B. It has a romantic, smooth, jazz-influenced sonic theme. And Anita Baker can also fall into this, right? Whether it's the use of the instrumentation, the smooth vocals, very smooth, persuasive. We see that here. And with Sade's songs like Smooth Operator and Your Love is King, that helped reintroduce those jazz elements into the mainstream R&B waves again. So hats off. And I would say Sade was really a birthplace or a reawakening of what would later become this neo-soul movement. Quiet as Kept, a huge inspiration for a lot of the softer singers that we are going to talk about that come after. And we also see within the 80s a rise of hip-hop, which captured Black American youth particularly. And we discussed this in the last video, so I won't harp on it too much. But this resulted in the New Jack Swing sound, which was in the late 80s, early 90s, where R&B became very hip-hop influenced production-wise. However, they still took a kin to having those gospel vocals, and vocals still did not take a complete backseat. And for more context, you'll notice in the 90s, stylistically, some R&B artists at this time were having difficulty selling R&B records during this transition because of this demand in hip-hop. It was the fresh, new, shiny thing. So we saw a lot of R&B artists market themselves within a hip-hop image, keeping the vocals, but also maybe featuring rappers or adding that hip-hop production. A lot of history repeats itself. But again, you have to know your history to understand your present and to know your future. In the 90s, a lot of you guys are probably more familiar with some of these artists. We see this era of hip hop soul emerging. It was a subgenre of contemporary R&B music. This subgenre evolved from the New Jack Swing. We can think about people like Mariah Carey, who really got their footing in the 90s. One of the greatest vocalists of all time. Kelly Price, Toni Braxton. We had Destiny's Child, TLC. Mary J. Blige, who's considered the queen of hip hop soul. Faith Evans, Deborah Cox, Escape, SWV, Brandy. Brandy is the source for a lot of the newer R&B talent, period. And she really changed the harmony game, the vocal stacking, arrangement, and runs. We have Monica, Janet Jackson, Aaliyah, who I would say was a huge influence stylistically on R&B artists to come from a visual, vocal, and music making perspective. Very futuristic. We'll talk more about Janet as well. But Janet also lived in this pop world too. So she was really expanding. Janet's introduction was really in the 80s, but I think she really soared like a rocket within that 90s period. And then again, I want to mention Sade. So I just listed people like Janet Jackson, Aaliyah, Sade. We really start to see a shift in sound within that mid-late 90s, an appreciation for softer tones. And in the late 90s, we would begin to see neo soul emerge commercially, which retained a lot of those hip hop elements, but re-employed elements of classic 70s soul music, right? There was fusions of funk, jazz, fusion, hip hop, reggae, African music, pop, rock, electro. And neo soul often had a strong female presence, which is why it's important to talk about this today. Neo soul was actually marketed as a alternative to this producer-driven digital style of R&B that was developing and thriving at the time. And history repeats itself, like I just said. We do lose a little bit of glimmer with each change, right? Each major change. And we move further and further from the plot. So I still am going to stand by what I say today. But I think that this neo-soul emergence was an attempt to bring R&B sonically back to its roots. This is a quote from Dmitry Ehrlich from Vibe magazine in 2002. He says, quote, "By definition, neo-soul is a paradox. Neo means new, soul is timeless. All the neo-soul artists in various ways perform balancing acts, exploring classic soul idioms while injecting a living, breathing presence into time-tested formulas. They humanize R&B, which has often been reduced to a factory-perfected product. Like sushi, neo-soul is fresh enough to be served raw." And he actually said, while Mary J. records are like going out on a flossy date, Jill Scott's are more like being invited into her home. So it's funny because there's always this debate. Is 90s R&B better than, or is that the best era? And if I'm being honest with you, older folks, the older generation, didn't think so. And from a music journalism standpoint, there was criticisms because R&B producer-wise, think of people like Thou Shall Not Be Named. It's like Voldemort. They were producing hip hop records and producing R&B records. So there were still qualms at the time with the direction that R&B was taking. And to some people, it felt more manufactured. It felt more digital. It was less live instrumentation, more producer-driven tracks. So it's just an interesting commentary. When you really do the research, you see that this stuff comes up. And through time, it slowly shifts. And it slowly shifts until it's a bit too far gone. And journalists at this time noted that a lot of neo-soul artists were predominantly female. So this was a huge push for women in R&B, revolutionizing the sound in the mainstream. Artists like Jill Scott, Erykah Badu. Erykah Badu has actually vocally and publicly rejected this neo-soul term, but she's often called the first lady of neo-soul. Lauryn Hill, India.Arie, and actually for those of you guys who don't know, Ariana Grande notes India.Arie as one of her biggest inspirations. So that's why I say to you guys, if you are into pop and you don't know about R&B much and you don't really care about it, because some of the greatest pop vocalists that we love and we listen to on the radio are inspired by a lot of these black artists. Into the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, we have artists like Beyonce, Maya, Alicia Keys, Keisha Cole, Fantasia, B-Day Twin shout out, Kiki Wyatt, Jasmine Sullivan. And I want to stop here for a second because she is one of the most skilled vocalists that we have seen in R&B, period. Honestly, period. The control, the emotional delivery, the technique, the range. Put some respect on Jasmine's name. We have Ashanti, we have Jennifer Hudson, Sierra, Kelly Rowland, JoJo, Tamar Braxton, but she was singing horribly a couple weeks ago. Side note, but Tamar can sing. She can sing her butt off. We have Rihanna, kind of. She was always low-key a little bit pop to me, but she ended up being able to kind of break out of that R&B mold. And then we even have Jhené Aiko. A lot of you guys might not know, but she was making music in the early 2000s. I would argue that Jhené might be the turning point of what became trendy and popular in female artists. With her debut album, I believe it might have been a mixtape, to be honest, Sailing Souls in 2013, that signaled a shift. And don't be mistaken, she had been making music for almost a decade. But I think of songs like The Worst. Think of that song melodically, sonically, the structure. A lot of music after that was modeled very similarly. Actually, Apple Music quoted that Selling Out project, saying that her voice is delicate, a little bit psychedelic, sultry neo-soul, and dark minimalist alt R&B with hypnotic vocals and a level of sexuality. I think that minimalist alt R&B is a great way to kind of describe the area we start to get in within female R&B. 2010s to mid-2010s, Elle Varner. Y'all are going to kill me in these comments. Unpopular opinion, but I hated that Refill song. That song was so annoying to me. Obviously great vocals, but I think it might just be me. So if I get stoned, I'm just being honest. I'm just being transparent. Seven Streeter, Solange, Kehlani, Tinashe. We'll talk about her. Ella Mai, her. Which I think she's personally one of the most well-rounded musicians of this bunch. A lot of people give her flack for winning so many Grammys, but I think it's because her not only sings, but she writes, she produces, she also plays a lot of the instruments on her songs, and a lot of people don't do that. So she's kind of on a different class when we talk about musicianship. We have Janae with another resurgence, Tiana Taylor, Tink, Ariana Grande, Sabrina Claudio. We all know those tweets though, so I kind of put her in the waste bin. Georgia Smith kind of floats in the middle. Alina Baraz, Tori Kelly. Tori Kelly, by the way, underrated vocalist. I don't know why she's not bigger. Amazing. One of the best vocalists today. But we would actually see R&B sales declining from around 2005 to 2013. Now, present day, we have folks like Summer Walker, I already mentioned SZA, Normani, Chloe, Halle, Ari Lennox, Victoria Monet, with her even getting co-signs and having songs with people like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Kiana Lede, Coco Jones, Now, Mariah the Scientist, Flo, Queen Naija, Money Long. And we will mention some fresh faces throughout this video. Don't you worry, but think of people like Money Long and Victoria Monet, who were songwriters and have been making music and have been in the industry for a decade plus, but they're finally kind of now breaking that mainstream. So that's why I included them there. We have quite a few genre benders in the R&B space that aren't quite fully R&B, and I feel like it's a disservice to only relegate them to that box. But people like SZA, Kehlani does a lot of stuff outside of that R&B lane. Tinashe, I even hesitate to really call Tinashe R&B like that. I feel like she leans more into that pop territory. So this is what y'all came here for. The vocals versus the vibe. I feel like that is the real issue that I'm seeing with female R&B particularly. So let's talk about the vocals. The vocal was a tool and the vessel that expressed the emotion. The emotion was often put on a platter. Okay, your voice speaks upon to you, it reverberates, and you're basically putting your heart on a platter and here. That's what R&B vocals were. And the way that female singers could express and emote carried a particular weight to me. And remember, R&B has heavy roots in blues, so the singing technique heavily relied on expression, passion, pain, and making sure you can portray that vocally. In R&B, there's a lot of use of melisma. We see this a lot more with R&B artists. It's really an informal term for vocal runs. So melisma is the singing style of a single syllable of text while moving between different notes in succession. And a common vocal feature that's used within skilled vocalists like Brandy, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Denise Williams, Celine Dion, Christina Aguilera, and Beyonce. A huge component of R&B singing. We also see in R&B like this vocal gymnastics, this mix of head and chest voice, right? The vibrato, the riffs, the runs, and it's really, really fun to witness. And it's this idea of full body singing, which we don't see anymore. The female powerhouse has really taken a back seat in the mainstream sense of R&B, female R&B. In a genre where it was once the most important thing vocally, right? I would even argue kind of a little bit before your looks, because all of the R&B girls, gorgeous women in their own right, but they weren't all cookie cutter. There were women who came in different shapes, sizes, skin tones. Like, the voice was huge in R&B, and I respect the hell out of that because there were so many different black women represented. You don't really see that now. But what we once thought was the fabric of the genre, vocals, is now maybe proving to just be a fleeting thought, a trend even. Surely it shouldn't be though. We lose recipes that way. And we can think historically in R&B, women have contributed to some of the best vocals in the genre of all time. Thank you, Whitney Houston. Vocal gymnastics, skill, technique, innovation, not just on the vocal front, but in performance, fashion, etc. Black women helped push the culture forward in R&B. And significant way that we did this was music. And I'm not going to harp on this too much, but I am going to take this a step deeper. I talked about this in my last video, but it's that church and gospel component that is missing. But collectively, less Black soul singers have ties to the church or sing in the choir. And a lot of vocal skill was developed, and honestly, not even just the skill, but rather the passion, the vocal passion, the emotion, the feeling, the soul through worship. We have to keep in mind more and more there have been more qualms within the church. A lot of people have trauma with the church. People have been deterred, corruptness that might have created some sort of hesitancy to participate in the church. So I think it's like a wider spread, like it's bigger than just music, right? But we have to admit that the vocals directly correlated to that training. Most of our greatest R&B vocalists were in a church choir, were, especially the women, were lead vocals in the choir, were in the choir, and that was expected of them. And I want to notate, for me, when I listen back, there's something so special about listening to these female vocalists in R&B. A feeling that was portrayed that couldn't be quite replicated, helping speak the experience that so many women felt like they couldn't convey. And R&B was that, especially for a lot of Black women. I mean, they were helping ladies get through breakups, learning to love ourselves, learning to love a man. You can argue that sometimes it was rooted a little bit pick-me-ish, but hey. I even think of someone like Mary J. Blige, whose voice technically was not the greatest, technically speaking, but you can't beat that passion that Mary J. has in her voice. You felt and you feel every emotion when she sings, and I think a lot of people resonated with that. If you didn't have the perfect, squeaky clean technical vocals, you made up for it too within that expression. And somebody like Mary J. Blige is a great example of this paradigm. And I even think of someone like Fantasia with When I See You. This is a song that's having a renaissance again within the last year or two. It's been a trend. A bunch of young men playing the song, going crazy because she is singing her ass off. Like, you just feel every word. And that is something that is absolutely missing or starting to miss from the equation. It's like that innateness, that extra sprinkle that can't quite be taught, but you have to have it in you. And mind you, Fantasia also grew up singing in the church, so there's that. Go back to this idea in this video of Selena Johnson talking about you had to be able to sing, and now you really don't have to. Allegedly, Melanie Fiona was told by an executive that she needed to water down her vocals because nobody's trying to hear that. I'm putting some words in their mouth. But actual vocalists within like that 2000s, 2010s period are being told you're singing too much. It's not palatable. And I feel like when we do have vocalists now in the female space, because we do, child. We got some vocalists. It seems like the song's production is either kind of sleepy or something about it feels watered down. I think of somebody like Queen Naija who has those church vocals. She does. But Queen Naija has that church voice, but her music often kind of doesn't match or fit her her vocal capability. And her vocals seemed a little too smoothed out, a bit auto-tuned. And I feel like she's one of those people that if she leaned into that voice and also had the production, the songwriting, everything to match it, she could actually really stand out. For me, Chloe Bailey has the vocals. She's one of the best vocalists of our generation. Excellent, amazing. She knows how to use her tool. But I just feel like her music just isn't, her solo music just isn't marrying properly. I don't know if it's sometimes the production. I sometimes I would love to hear her more with live instrumentation. I don't know, child. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But she's one of those where it's like you have the voice, but it just sometimes doesn't click. Essentially in R&B now, when we talk about the vocals, we live in this world of whisper singers. To me, it's not a diss. A lot of people use that as a diss and think it's horrible. I think there's beauty in different tones and different ways of singing. Again, it does become a little bit concerning when it's plaguing, like majority of mainstream artists coming on the scene are kind of whispery in a genre that was rooted in like this full body singing. That is concerning to me. I don't have a problem with like that being like somebody's stylistic choice. I like a lot of whisper singers, but the more over time you kind of notice that we have more and more of them. And really, these vocals, it's nothing that makes you want to throw a shoe. Nah. But remember, a lack of vocal gymnastics does not mean that somebody can't sing. Remember, there can be a gift in tone and a beautiful smooth runs. I think Kehlani takes the cake on some of those runs and the smoothness in her tone. You can have a gift in musical arrangement and intention. Jhené Aiko uses frequencies and she uses mantras to repeatedly say in her lyrics, right? To promote affirmation. SZA, sometimes her lyricism is questionable. Love you, girl, but sometimes it is. But sometimes the lyricism and her unique tone offers like something special or different. Now, one issue that I do have with some of the newer talent vocally also is their inability to open their mouth. Sometimes it sounds like peanut butter, like on the roof of your mouth. Love you, girl, but SZA sometimes, she be singing in cursive, which I'm fine with that, whatever. But sometimes her words mush together. Summer Walker's another person that sometimes she sings really nasally, but doesn't seem like she's quite pushing out her words fully. It seems like she's kind of singing in the bottom of her throat. And to me, I wonder, I'm like, is it illegal to enunciate? Like, damn. Some songs it's worse, some songs it's okay, some songs I don't mind it. But that's another issue that I have. So now the second half of the equation, the vibes. This is the real culprit here, if we want to be honest. Now, I would say in the early 2000s, there was a push of club hits, right? Not just within R&B, but hip hop, period, and curating an experience. So a level of pop appeal, a hip hop mix and hints of R&B. At this time, R&B and hip hop records were charting extremely well. Actually, in 2004, 80% of the songs that topped the R&B charts were also at the top of the Hot 100. And I think of Aaliyah passed away in 2001, but leading up to her passing, Aaliyah with producers like Timbaland and this futuristic sound, fashion at the forefront, visuals at the forefront, softer and slyer vocals. Aaliyah created and curated an image, a vibe that other girls wanted to emulate, wanted to be. And although she passed away very young, her legacy and innovation would carry and reverberate through a lot of like that 2000 class of artists, where I can argue the vibes started to become more important in the package than just like the vocals, which previously was more at focus. So I think of artists like Sierra. I think of artists like Kelly Rowland, Carrie Hilson.
I'm sorry, guys, but she cracks me up in this music video.
Like This is my song. Not too much. Not too much. But these ladies really like had those club bangers on lock. But then I feel like we had artists like Keisha Cole who would give us a ballad. Okay, like Keisha was like best of both worlds, but then she could give you a club banger too, and sometimes she could roll it all into one. Now, current R&B, let's talk about it. How do we get to the vibe conversation? The production is now the star of the show. The vibe is the star of the show. The aesthetic is the star of the show, and quite as kept, some of the powerhouses don't have that it factor or allure that labels want to push now, unfortunately. I think with the women in R&B, it's much easier to create an aesthetic or to curate a vibe to sell package. So in a lot of ways, the singing kind of started to fall less and less on the totem pole. And so a lot of girls provided the vibes that different women could resonate with, adding to their fan base. It was almost kind of like a marketing tactic, really like start carving out these niche fan bases for each of these girls. So when I think of Jhené Aiko, this is a very general representation because when you listen to her lyrics, it's not all about this. But on the outside, love, light, fairies, frequency, healing. SZA, alt, quirky. A little bit baddie wrapped into one. Insecure. She really wore that on her sleeve. Kehlani came with this tatted imagery, less flashy, mask femme expression. And then we have her. Artsy, mysterious. But you could see, guys, their personalities through their fashion choices as well. And even when you go to some of their concerts, you can kind of tell. Their fans have a vibe or an aesthetic, right? You go to a Jhené Aiko concert, girls are picking out outfits to go. Right? Like everybody kind of has a look that they're trying to achieve. And I'll be quite honest with you, as a young black girl, it was refreshing to hear some of these ladies touch on topics not adjacent to men or love, but to self-esteem, to internal issues, to motivation. They still talked about those things, but I have connected with a plethora of these artists because I was at a coming of age period. So I saw myself within them. But I will say it doesn't fall on deaf ears or blind eyes that also the face of R&B, visually, guys, for a while has become very light. I love some of these girls down, but I think labels in the industry started to push a certain aesthetic, and by aesthetic, unfortunately, they were going by skin tone. Skin tone shouldn't be aesthetic, but now let's talk about the categorization of female R&B, the vibe part 2. It's going to make you guys chuckle. This is going to make you laugh. So, there's been this rise of informal terms. Hookah R&B, and lash tech R&B. I know you just looked at your screen. Some of y'all either laughed or some of y'all were like, what? And some of y'all were like, that makes sense. So I've been on a mission to try to figure out these classifications. Here's my shot at it. I think it's a code word for like alt R&B, alternative R&B. I think people have now attributed listening to these certain artists when doing these types of activities, whether like at the hookah lounge or getting your lashes done. But there's like this implied vapidness or basicness that's kind of assigned to people who listen to some of these artists in this category. So I've seen this come up quite commonly. Somebody said about Kehlani, I want to like her music, but I just can't get into the hookah R&B. That is very disrespectful. People say that Janae, Mariah the Scientist, Summer Walker, SZA even give hookah. So I don't know if this is like the music that you hear in the background while girls smoking hookah and like blowing into the camera. I don't know. On Twitter, somebody had said that Chloe's new song, Rose, sounds like hookah lounge music. Someone said it was beyond lash tech music at this point. And I often find that sometimes when people make these blanket statements, I think they have a very surface understanding of these people's music. Like they haven't actually like went into their discography. So they don't know the deep cuts. They only hear the popular shit. And I will admit, some of the popular shit from some of these girls are very basic. But once you leave this video, please look up Bright by Kehlani or look up Gone Girl by SZA. They all have music in there that kind of is more of like a take home, like a church moment, or is more rooted in like that neo soul, or is rooted more in that like traditional R&B. I also think that the production choices. So Coco Jones did a Almost There cover, and it was with Disney. And somebody said, almost to the hookah lounge, I guess. Now, you are so wrong for that. Why would you say that? Somebody said it sounds like paint and sip at the hookah lounge.
This whole town can slow you down. People taking the easy way.
I'm like, come on. A lot of people felt like they added a beat to the song that they didn't really need to. And it didn't fully complement like the strength and the beauty of her vocals. Sometimes people see black people, they say black people equals at a beat. And it's like, you don't need to always do that. And T-Ways. There's also this level of hits and virality today that a lot of artists are trying to reach. There's been this pacifying of the vocalist and laying it to rest. Not just within R&B, but pop as well. Often these vocalist songs aren't palatable to the mainstream because the mainstream audience wants to be able to sing along to your song. And if you're doing all of this up here and going here, here, and here, people can't hear that once or twice, get it, or feel like they relate to it. Because relatability, everybody, is the thing. Everybody wants to feel special. Everybody wants to feel like they can do. Yeah. So we see a lot of these songs that are seemingly a bit more basic, songs that people can sing along to go further. That doesn't lend itself to really pushing vocalists anymore. So it's that saying, the song that everyone can sing is a hit. I mean, why do you think artists in several genres were able to get as famous as they are? Because they're relatable. Their superpower is being just like you. And people can find that non-threatening, more palatable, and easier to enjoy. And that doesn't always lend itself to pushing people who have a high knowledge of their craft. Mind you, there's also a myth that old school R&B singers all had these spectacular, amazing voices, grandiose voices, crazy range, runs, riff, soul. Some people didn't always have that. I think of a Janet Jackson. She's one of those first people that really the branding was all together. The performance, the outfits, the visuals, the looks, the songs. Her vocals weren't strong, right, in comparison to a lot of these people, but they didn't have to be. We gotta like be kind of realistic though when we have these conversations. And then we can talk about women and the push of hypersexuality in R&B. We already know that labels and execs are eager to push sex onto women. That's what sells. And there's this level of misogyny, sexism, and male dominance that exists in the music industry. They have a hand in curating images, pushing music, pushing who should be the next star. What makes you guys think that R&B wouldn't be any different in the 21st century? There's a lot of historical implications here that actually go very deep and are very deep rooted. I want to be cautious about censoring women because finally women have agency, right? In some ways we do have the free will to do what we want to do and be who we want to be. Some women do like to express themselves sexually, and that's completely fine. But it does become interesting when it seems like everyone's kind of doing it and it doesn't quite seem to be super authentic to certain artists. It seems like it's kind of like one album's this and then you come out one day and it's this. There was no evolution into it. It was like day and night, like a flip switch. I even think like with Chloe and Normani's new album. Chloe's album, Trouble in Paradise, I reviewed it on my Patreon. I didn't love it. And one of the reasons why I felt like some of the lyrics were just... That is a very unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people lived for that album. But sometimes it does feel a little bit forced when we were living off of like this Chloe and Halle idea where they were in this like alternative space, really kind of carving a lane stylistically, aesthetically, all of that, creating almost their own sound. And then you go solo and it's just kind of like a 180. Like it's completely different. Normani, in her album, there was a lot of like sexual talk, which is fine, but like for a debut album, I wanted to get to know her a little bit better, and I felt like the lyrics didn't give me a chance to really let us in or like feel it fully. And I do think that some of the girls now are all trying to fit like into this alternative, like this contemporary kind of minimalist R&B sound, when some of them I think would probably thrive in another subgenre. Some of them would probably thrive in a neo-soul area. Not that you have to relegate yourself to that solely, but some of them seem to be kind of shying away from like doing kind of quirkier different sounds because maybe that's not going to sell. Now when we talk lyrically, in R&B, it does kind of follow some of the grievances that I expressed within my male R&B video. Go check that out. There's been less attention to metaphors, euphemisms, this overtness and directness that I don't only see just in the guys, but I do kind of see it with the women. But it has become a casual staple to sing about these things with no filter within R&B, whether it's ideas of toxicity. Again, it's the way you write about it, because that has always existed. So today, guys, we are going to play a game. It's really not even a game. This is going to be a presentation. I'm just going to read you a couple lyrics from some newer R&B songs, and we're going to have a fun little time. Some of these songs I actually kind of like from a melodic perspective, production perspective, but hey, I got to give you guys examples. So we have Summer Walker's song called Just Might. Said love is a losing game, so I just might be a hoe. What am I missing? Seem like a game or from a sugar daddy or a drug dealer. Boom. Chloe's new song, Shake. She says, you like it when it jiggle, make it wiggle. Give it to you better, make it sentimental. Need it left, right, up, down, in the middle. Clap it loud, bounce it down, down south, way to the ground. Normani, Grip, which actually I really like this song from like a production standpoint. I think it was really creative. But she goes 5'4", thicky, thicky. Vibe around the city, rolling sticky, sticky. Backed outside, got a litty, litty. Pretty and I got some bad with me, with me. I get what I want, gimme, gimme. Those lyrics kind of make me laugh. It's just like, I'm like, We have SZA's song, Nobody Gets Me. This song is like, she's kind of an R&B. I'm gonna just say this because this lyric is kind of outlandish, but she does stuff like this all the time. She goes, took a long vacation, no makeup, just Jay-Z. You were deep, now we beefing, had me butt naked at the MGM. Hi, I hope I can get monetized. Janae Aiko, fairy on the way. She said, that make my soul smile, that make me so proud. I like to F when I'm drunk, and I like to F when I'm drunk. Fairy's on the way. Very direct. Very forward, not demure, not very mindful. That was our little fun segment called Read the R&B Lyrics. Read the crazy bleep, 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 bleep R&B lyrics, like Sir Paid a lot. Now, again, we talked about this mixing of hip-hop and rap mixed with R&B. But each era slowly started to move further and further from the plot, right? To where we see that these two genres are blending entirely too much, changing the DNA of the genre. I talked about this more in depth within the last video because I feel like the men have more of an issue with this. But I will say this. I feel like I'm seeing more female rappers wanting to play R&B singer. Latto's new album, Sugar Honey Iced Tea, was really great. But there was a stretch of the album where I was like, she's singing a little bit too much for me. You know, like, it's like, I just need you to rap. And then you got the R&B singers wanting to be female rappers sometimes. Summer Walker's song with Sexy Red, whatever that was. And mind you, there is a level of multifacetedness that artists should be allowed to play with, but you start to kind of see them blend a lot more. I think that was funny. And no, the girls to me are not as violent or vulgar towards men in R&B as I see the opposite. There are some though. Like I'll Kill You by Summer Walker featuring Jhené Aiko is crazy. So maybe I take that back. I don't know. It's like with some of these girls, you wouldn't really assume that the lyrics were as crazy because some of their voices are so angelic. So I feel like there might be like this facade or like this perception that it's not as bad as it is. One of the last issues I want to touch on with the current state is the sameness. That's not even a word, but the sameness and lack of vocal identity and individuality. When I listen to R&B, for example, and when I lived at home, I'd be playing it and my mom would be like, who is this singing? She'd try to guess somebody and then I'd be like, no, that's not her. She's like, I thought this was this person. So she'd take a guess and get it wrong. And she would literally say, everyone kind of sounds the same to me. And from the outside ear, they do. I will give you that. If you don't listen to some of these girls like religiously, a lot of them blend together. I think there's a lack of like individual style, and I often do think that that leans into the vocal style, technique, and ability. The less ability level you have, the more you use like the same production tools, you have the same things afforded to you like the auto-tune, etc., that it just kind of starts to blend together. And I honestly feel like you used to be able to close your eyes and know who was singing that song. If I were to like sit down and try to pinpoint what makes each girl different musically, I would kind of have a bit of a hard time with some of them. So let's talk about what I feel like could be a potential renaissance that's happening right now with female R&B, particularly from a mainstream perspective. I actually do think that the girls are in a much better and forward-thinking space within the R&B genre in comparison to the guys. When we talk about vocally, performance-wise, aesthetic curation, feeling, subject matter, emotion, and overall performance quality. I think more of the girls have more star quality and star potential. And I'm not going to lie, looking at this list of people I'm going to mention, I see a better future. I feel optimistic within some of these artists forging forward the genre. They're keeping hints of like this old school flair, or at least it seems like they've done their homework. Like they know what the essence of R&B is, but kind of keep it futuristic. I think Victoria Monet is one of the most perfect textbook examples of this. She's done a very great job of capturing an old school 70s essence while also keeping it fresh and unique. From a visual perspective, from the music, the writing, the collaborations, very refreshing. I even feel like Money Long, she's kind of bringing back this early 2K, mid 2000s R&B writing and production. Made for Me, it gave that. I feel like that's why that song got so big. It became like what I think might be considered a classic one day because it had like that formula there. Coco Jones as well. I think she's more of a soulful tone, living more in this like old school soul methodology, which I'm very excited about. And I think a lot of people are. I think she's very promising. Flow for the girl groups. I recently went to Kehlani's Crash concert and they opened for Kehlani. And the harmonies were tight. You know, the girls, they had their cute little move, but they were singing and they sounded really great together. I have to give a little nod, but Kehlani's While We Wait too has a neo soul feeling to it, right? She really tapped more into her R&B root. I do think that there's a bit of a renaissance in the singer performer within R&B as well. We didn't talk as much about Beyonce today because I talk about her all the time, but she is the ultimate performer vocalist. But I think of, you know, people like Chloe, Normani, Kehlani, SZA, Tinashe, who can put on a show, right? I'm not trying to compare them completely, but I think that they're like, they value the performance quality as well. So some of the new girls that I like, please add a list, a running list. Alex Isley, love, 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 love her music. Check her out if you have not. You will not regret that. Savannah Ré, Snow Allegra, who to me is very reminiscent of Sade. A little bit. I guess there had even been debates, like full-on cat fights on the internet of like people saying that Snow Allegra is like our generation's Sade. And Snow Allegra was like, not too much. There's only ever going to be one. So she makes really great music. Hope Tala is like that lineage between pop and R&B, but she kind of takes like this neo soul perspective, but it's still forward thinking and modern, and it's fun. Justine Skye has some. She got some in there. And I discovered this girl named Aquila. You guys should check her out. She's pretty cool. Let me know, guys, like, who are some girls that you're listening to that you like? You know, R&B is often left out of the conversation historically, but also when we pertain and talk about what's happening in the industry today. We always talk about pop. We always talk about the pop legends. But what about those R&B legends who helped inspire some of those pop legends? So I wanted to take the time to really talk about what's happening with female R&B. I hope you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button to see more commentary content like this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to see you guys in my next one. Bye.